names are back again: Williams, Ligier, Renault, Brabham, all after the world title, more than anything else. It was the French challenge aimed at all the different crowns that year that drew attention, and you will see that Laffite, Pironi, Jabouille and Arnoux really weren't all that far from taking the titles. 20 years later, in any case, they haven't forgotten any of it. Formula 1 1980, we're off. The 1980 season starts, as was the tradition at the time, with an early South American tour. As early as the first fortnight in January, they set off in the direction of Buenos Aires for the Argentinian Grand Prix. And whichever way you looked at it, Formula 1 seemed to be in a hot spot. The 1980 season seemed to be placed under an argumentative, not say mutinous star. In Argentina, the drivers protested about the state of the track, and not without reason. They were so furious that they threatened to strike, but because of a lack of unanimity, their resolution failed when faced with the rigid attitude of the organizers and the stable bosses. They are paid and well paid. They have got to drive, declared Bernie Ecclestone, the head of the Constructors Association. There are a few bitter memories. Two track exits, one pit stop. Despite that Alan Jones won it, no one had ever seen anything like it. The French were way back, only the beginner Alain Prost making it to the finish in 6th position. The young Nelson Piquet was second behind Jones, a foretaste of things to come. In Argentina, Formula 1 went off course. But 10 weeks later in Spain, it almost got lost altogether. A battle of force was taking place between the International Federation and the Constructors Association. In the balance was the real exercise of power. The smaller stables decided to organize the Grand Prix without official sanction. We are just sorting that out, just a few more minutes. But the big names all lined up in the opposite camp, and once again, through lack of unanimity, the revolt was to fail. Renault, in full agreement with Ferrari and Alfa Romeo, has decided not to take part in the warm-ups, which have no legal standing. For many years, the exclusive domain of small stables that were mainly British, Formula 1 was beginning to see the arrival of the big manufacturers, and it was their pressure that was to bring about this development that blew the lid off of the sport. The role of Renault in this respect is of the utmost importance. Until 1980, the turbo engine had been more of a curiosity than a real threat. It was known to have brilliant moments, but to be too temperamental to have its sights on the championship. Now, despite not getting it right in Argentina, Renault was to take the ascendant so clearly over the following two Grand Prix that its rivals began to believe that they would be definitely outclassed. Gérard Larousse still remained cautious. We have made progress, but we do yet have the reliability of a team like Williams, for example. Our car does not yet make our job any easier, as it is using a new technique, and we are principally taking on the Ford engine, which is a bit simpler. We are using an engine that has been specifically designed to race, and we have to deal with all the problems ourselves.
De notre côté, nous utilisons un moteur qui est tout à fait spécifique et bien entendu, nous essuyons nous-mêmes tous les problèmes.
The warm-ups for the Brazilian Grand Prix were fought out in a carnival atmosphere under the watchful eyes of Bernard Hinault, the director of Renault cars. Jabouille dominated them. Villeneuve's Ferrari was up there between the Jabouille's yellow car and Pironi's blue one. But it was only a flash in the pan, and the only time during the season that a Ferrari was to stick its nose out. World champion in 1979, Ferrari was reduced to the part of bit player in 1980. Things changed fast in Formula One. On the fast circuit at Interlagos, at 800 meters altitude, the Renaults were unbeatable on pure performance. Only the Ligiers were able to keep up with them thanks to their remarkable road holding. Jabouille was leading, but Lafitte remained menacing until a minor ignition fault pulled him up. Third, Arnoux was fighting it out with the Angelis Lotus. But a little after halfway through the race, when the Renault double was in sight, Jabouille was the victim of a turbo breakdown, which meant that he had to abandon. Arnoux, though, had no problems in having worn down the Angelis resistance, went on to the first Formula One win of his career. The victory of Renault at Sao Paulo was no surprise. What was more surprising was that it was René Arnoux, their second driver, who fulfilled the mission. It is a great pleasure for me to have won, especially here, because it is a very difficult circuit. It is physically hard, very hard. I was afraid that I would not be able to keep the pressure up. Of course, well, I am very satisfied to have won the race, but also to have been able to keep up the pressure with no problems. When you overtook your teammate, Jean-Pierre Jabouille, what did you think? Well, honestly, I was really disappointed. On Thursday, we had big problems. We were 4 seconds behind the others, and Jean-Pierre found some excellent adjustments to make the car competitive. He really deserved to win, but that's racing. It is in a stable's interest to put 2 cars forward for the race, but Jean-Pierre's turn will come. The next Grand Prix was in South Africa, on a circuit that was even more favorable to the turbo. The fact is that at 1,800 meters altitude, atmospheric engines get a bit breathless, whilst the turbo is hardly affected by the lack of oxygen. A serious accident during the warm-ups. The Swiss Marc Surer comes off the track and suffers multiple fractures to his legs. The drivers consider that they are insufficiently protected in their seats. The Renaults, for their part, dominate the warm-ups, and there was never any doubt about the color of the front row. Jabouille takes pole position. Of course I am optimistic, but I haven't forgotten the Brazilian Grand Prix where I had a lead of about 10 seconds and I had a problem. I will try and avoid the same thing happening, and if the same doesn't happen, I will be almost certain to win. Before the start, the Renault Elf stand monopolized all the attention. And at the green light we saw an incredible piece of teamwork. In the middle, between Jabouille and Jones, Arnoux leads the pack. But it is to be better opening the door for his teammate before pulling back and slamming it in Jones' face. Wheels next to wheel, the 2 Renault drivers take off. Very quickly, the gap in front of Lafitte and Jones gets bigger. Jabouille and Arnoux control the race as they wish. Three-quarters of the way through the race, it seems to be all over and the double seems certain. But Jabouille slows down and stops. Front tire punctured. Once again, luck is not with Jabouille and favors Arnoux. Behind Lafitte, Jones and Pironi are fighting out a tough duel for third place, with the Frenchman winning, but only just. That was close. Arnoux and Lafitte Pironi, the South African Grand Prix turns into triumphant and historic triple for French car racing. Arnoux takes the lead in the World Championship ranking. The president of the French Federation is delighted. We have three Frenchmen in the lead, and at one moment there were four. Problem though, the situation gets tense at Renault, where Jabouille, the designated #1 driver, feels that his status is compromised by the success of his teammate. I was almost certain of winning here, but 20 laps from the finish, a puncture ruined my hopes. I hope to be able to catch up because this is only the third race of the season, but this is going to be a tough season for me. 18 points on the championship table. So how do you see the future now? I think that I'm going to have to continue to work very hard, because in Formula 1 you can never stop. We are going to start a much more difficult period for us with Monaco, Jarama and Long Beach. But we have progressed on those circuits too. I don't think that we will be able to win, but mark a few points. Why not? But the situation on the ground is not necessarily a reflection of the forces present. For when Renault, for example, arrived at Long Beach for the West United States Grand Prix, one might have thought that they had in fact already used all their jokers. Renard, in any case, would remember the year of 1980, where he was able to catch a glimpse of winning the world title. Renault repeated in more or less the same way, the same scenario as Ligier the year before, by doing really well at the start and then keeping the maddest dreams running. Was the state company going to succeed this time where Ligier had failed? In 1980, it was only my second year at that level of competition. Maybe I didn't dare to say things as it should be. I should have said, maybe we have some problems and it's not the first time. Let's try to eradicate those problems. But, well, in fact, I don't have real regrets because it was like that. I was in a better position than Jabouille. And it was not so easy inside the team because Jean-Pierre was the leader. Well, motor racing, it's not like, you know, tennis or where the players have the same balls or the same shoes. We can have some failures and we always have to analyze it and work. At the beginning, I was a mechanic, you know. In fact, when I was a mechanic, I was often at the garage trying to work with my team and hoping that I gave the best of what I had. Nelson Piquet took pole position in the Long Beach Grand Prix. He was the only driver to use hard rubber wheels, which normally have a lower performance. In fact, his choice proved correct and the Brazilian went on to his first Grand Prix success. Although Ricardo Zunino's Brabham had already had to retire, Piquet's fairly flew along the Californian streets with, and this was a surprise, not only the Renaults holding on well, but so were the Alfa Romeos driven by Patrick Ipaia and Bruno Giacomelli. During this Grand Prix, there was a serious accident. Clay Regazzoni, who had given the Williams team its first Grand Prix victory the year before and who was now driving for Ensign, suddenly found himself without brakes right in the middle of the straight. The force of the shock against the wall was terrible and Regazzoni was lifted clear with a cervical lesion that was to leave him permanently paralyzed. Victory was Piquet's in any case at Long Beach, and as a result he came level with René Arnoux at the head of the championship table. That year, without counting the Spanish Grand Prix where the result was declared null, there were only 14 Grand Prix on the program and only the 5 best results from each half of the season were taken into account. So it was important to mark points efficiently and regularly. At the same moment, Piquet was the only person alongside Pironi to have marked points 3 times in the 4 Grand Prix that had already taken place. We find the same Pironi at Zolder for the first European Grand Prix which took place in Belgium, a Grand Prix that marked the entry into the rule book of new rule concerning tires. On Goodyear's initiative, qualification tires were banned, all competitors had to use the same tires for the warm-ups and for the race itself, but the system did not last because Michelin rejected it after Monaco. Ligier still thought that they could do it and the team showed promising regularity for the rest of the season. The JS11 from 1979 was renamed the JS11-15 and was the subject of a series of modifications that were essentially aerodynamic. Alongside Jacques Lafitte, Didier Pironi replaced Patrick Ipaia and Jackie Ickx. Pironi was a hungry young wolf who was very determined, solid and with a lot of stamina and whose first Grand Prix win, as was the case for Arnoux and Piquet, took its time in coming. Alan Jones took pole position, but right from the start Pironi managed to surprise him. He has just done the most difficult bit. Jones was stuck in between the 2 Ligiers. Reutemann in the second Williams wasn't far away. Here was the beginning of a duel that, he got the feeling, would go on throughout the season with, no doubt, the Renaults as judges. Note that the team in possession of the World Championship title, Ferrari, was in the doldrums, only Jody Scheckter having marked 2 miserable points at Long Beach. In Formula 1 year follows another, but nothing is necessarily the same. For the time being, Pironi was fulfilling his contract perfectly and was heading for victory. French Formula 1 was on top of the world again. When Renault isn't there, Ligier was capable of dominating. The gaps were increasing and everyone was hanging on to their position. Pironi, Jones, Lafitte. Behind them, Reutemann was having a really tough time containing Arnoux, who once again was in front of Jabouille, his team's leading driver. No problems in the lead for Pironi and Jones. On the other hand, for Lafitte, things were going a bit awry. The Frenchman had to go into the pits to purge his brakes, so he instantly lost any chance of marking precious points. So Lafitte was down in the dumps, but Pironi was still nothing, even if Jones had come a bit closer and was now harassing the Ligier. But on that day, the 4th of May 1980, in his 35th Grand Prix, Didier Pironi was unbeatable. He claimed victory in his first Grand Prix in front of Jones, Reutemann, Arnoux, Jarier and Villeneuve. Was this that famous clique so often talked about in Formula 1? What is certain is that while he was at it, Pironi took pole position at Monaco. The 6th competition of the season, Ligier definitely had things going their way and Pironi seemed to grow wings. Was still leader of the championship. In short, all was going well for the French forces that were getting ready to take on the most prestigious Grand Prix of the year. but they needed to keep their eyes on those devils from Williams, with like Reutemann and Jones were to take the second and third times in the warms-up. Though Monaco looked as though it is going to be a difficult competition, because at Renault they realized that the turbo would not have the advantage on the streets of the Principality. Arnoux found himself in the two backlines along with Jody Scheckter, Emerson Fittipaldi and Mario Andretti, so nothing less than the leader of the championship and three previous world champions. Motorsport sometimes seems ungrateful. The start of the 1980 Monaco Grand Prix will remain in everyone's memory because of the terrifying somersault by Derek Daly and his Tyrrell, which took off over the pack of cars. At least 4 drivers were taken out of the running, including Prost and Jarier. In front, Pironi succeeded where it was important he should not fail in his start, so he led in front of Jones, Reutemann, Lafitte, Patrick Depailler, who certainly remembered winning here in 1978, and Nelson Piquet. So the 2 Ligiers and the 2 Williams were out in front as they were in Belgium a fortnight before. But this time, success was not to be for Alan Jones, who had to abandon because of a transmission failure. For Pironi, appearances were misleading. Handicapped by a third gear that jumped almost from the start, he also had to deal with the rain that was falling intermittently on some parts of the circuit. On the 55th lap, Pironi didn't come round again. He had come off level with the Casino. I think that I could have avoided what happened and won the Grand Prix. So, finally, it was that devil Reutemann who raffled the prize, dominating Jacques Lafitte and Patrick Depailler, who also had to abandon without too much trouble. At Ligier, they were obviously shaken. You know, when you give 100% throughout the whole race, you might have a tiny lack of concentration, which can lead to a small error, and that small mistake can have big repercussions. Their hopes onto the French Grand Prix. Fought out on the Paul Ricard circuit, Guy Ligier used the occasion to make an agreement with Peugeot for partnership with Talbot from 1981 official. Maybe galvanized by this promise for the future, Jacques Lafitte took pole position at Le Castellet. Didier is complaining of a slight understeer. I have the same understeer, but I can deal with it better because Didier drives into the corners in a more brutal way. Anyway, if someone at Ligier is going to win, it will be me. Lafitte was pretty optimistic, but didn't need to be superstitious to guess that it would not be that easy. The day before at Ligier, they had come across an apparently insoluble petrol leak. So Lafitte might well be at the front with his car. He had also got to deal with excessive wear on his tires. Pironi, who was behind, had given way to Jones. Little by little, the Australian reduced the gap behind Lafitte, and the outcome seemed to be unavoidable. The Williams used 15-inch wheel rims instead of 13s. Ligier, who had tried these new rims, were criticized for having rejected them too quickly. 20 laps before the finish, Jones managed it and got past and headed for his second victory of the year, and as a result took the lead in the championship. The first half of the season was coming too close, and the numbers didn't lie. Jones led with 28 points, in front of Piquet with 25, then Pironi and Arnoux level on 23. Lafitte had only got a total of 16 points, so he would have to work hard to make up for lost time in the second half of the season, which started at Brands Hatch with the British Grand Prix. At Ligier, they used the 15-inch wheel rims this time, and the result could not be denied. The two French cars outclassed all their competitors and took the front row. The happiest person of all was the boss, of course, who, what's more, was celebrating his 50th birthday. They've been really nice and didn't say anything about it. But I have to say that they've given me a lovely present. Front row for the British Grand Prix that's half a century gone the right way. Unfortunately for Guy Ligier, the story does not continue in the same vein. Just as they dominated the warm-ups, so they were disappointing in the race, and it was all the fault of those infamous wheel rims. The problem was that these new elements incorporated into the mechanics could not take the weight transmitted by the supports and deformed. Pironi and Lafitte may well have dominated the early part of the race, but they were only putting off the inevitable. Behind them, Jones and Piquet only had to wait for the right moment. Pironi was the first to stop with a puncture. Lafitte took his place, but the problem was taking its toll, and he came off the track. So Jones took over command, and Guy Ligier was furiously angry and accused his drivers of every possible fault. An unfair declaration that almost provoked a divorce between the team and Didier Pironi, who put himself on the transfer market. In the British Grand Prix we had problems with the wheels, which split. It's a pity because the car dominated the others in a pretty incredible way. What was more serious perhaps was that all hope for the title had almost gone for the Ligier drivers, who had to sit and watch Jones going off after the championship. The Ligier was a very good car, if not the best at the beginning of the season. I think that technically we had what was needed to win the World Championship. On the human front we were also very motivated, but we were held back by a lack of financial means that was not a problem for the others. We could have won, but we lost because of this lack of means. Yes, indeed, it is because of the lack of means. The summer was then marked by a tragic event, the death of Patrick Depailler. It was the 1st of August 1980. At the end of the morning, on the Hockenheim circuit, which was to welcome the German Grand Prix 9 days later, on what would also have been this unusual champion's 36th birthday. Patrick Depailler was killed at the wheel of his Alfa Romeo, a car that he had proved to have lost none of its natural velocity. Depailler had returned to competition after a serious Delta plane accident in 1979. Depailler had come back to the top by dint of an enormous effort to retrain his limbs and pure willpower. The straight at Hockenheim will remain cursed forever. So, hearts were heavy at the start of the German Grand Prix, which saw Jones and Jambouille taking off from the front row. On this ultra-fast circuit, Renault was expected to come back to the forefront and Ligier returned to join the rest. But the opposite happened. For the time being, Jabouille was in the lead in front of Jones and Arnoux. Lafitte was doing well in fourth. Pironi and Reutemann were fighting it out just behind. The first surprise was Pironi abandoning on the 18th lap with a broken wheel support, which didn't bode well for Lafitte, who was making the most of an extraordinary coincidence that saw the two Renaults abandon at the same time and for the same reason. We were on the 27th lap. A valve spring had just come loose and Arnoux and Jabouille have had to give up. As a result, Lafitte found himself propelled into second position, but the solid Jones was in front with his no less solid Williams. Solid? Not necessarily. 6 laps from the finish, Jones disappeared into the pits, the victim of a puncture. A final drama that allowed Jacques Lafitte to win an unexpected victory, although it seemed undeserved against the rest of the season. Unfortunately, this was to be the swan song for the Ligier team, who, although they managed to hang on to second place in the Constructors' Championship, had hoped for better things. We missed the season, but because of technical reasons. For instance, we were good at Brands Hatch, but we broke our rims. At that time, we were not testing as much as today. You know, it's sure that people now must think that it was not serious not to test the rims. Indeed, we did it, but not with all the parameters like heat or strength. We were not very rich, you know. You have to know it. It was difficult, even if we tried to give a lot of money.
On n'était pas milliardaire, il faut bien ouvrir ça à la tête, c'était difficile pour l'équipe de travailler. Financièrement, c'est dur, Guy donnait beaucoup d'argent en début de saison pour faire des voitures, on préparait tout, puis à un moment donné, le robinet se resserrait un tout petit peu.
At Renault, the 1980 championship finishes rather paradoxically too, with some fireworks, but in the shape of a rather desperate final fling. It took place in Austria, on the fastest circuit of the season, where Jabouille had every intention of doing what he had set out to do since the break between the 1979 and 1980 season, even if he was taken to be a dreamer. For me, in 1980, after the 1979 season, and with a terrific car, I was sure that I would become world champion. No problems indeed for the Renault boys at Zeltweg. They are both on front row. The Renault was, with no doubt, the fastest car of all this year, with 5 poles, only 3 for Ligier and Williams, 2 for Brabham, 1 for Alfa Romeo. But during the Grand Prix, it was not the same. The Williams made 6 times the fastest lap, 4 for Renault only. At the stand, Alan Jones and Didier Pironi take the lead. But it won't last for the Williams driver.
Arnoux made a bad start. Jones is in front, but Arnoux's catching up.
The Zeltweg track is perfect for the Renault. It is the fastest of the season. It's located at 700 meters high. Arnoux then takes the lead. Then Jabouille overtakes Jones. The Renault are flying. Jabouille seems faster than Arnoux, But Arnoux is now the leader of the team, and if he wins, he can still be world champion. Just before mid-race, Arnoux is slowing. The problem comes from the tires, and Arnoux will have to stop 3 times. For the glory, Arnoux will do the fastest lap, but too late. He won't be in the top 6, and he won't be world champion. Jabouille is leading, but will he win? His tires are supposed to be less resistant than for Arnoux. Jones is narrowing the gap, but Jabouille is resisting. Finally, Jabouille wins, but what a suspense at the end. Big emotion for the mechanics of Jabouille, because he was so unlucky. 15 retirements since his victory at the French GP in 1979.
Tu m'as fait pleurer. Je me suis dit pourvu qu'il tienne.
Je termine une course.
When I finish a race, I win it, Jean-Pierre will say. Just like Ligier, Renault missed a good opportunity. The title was not far out of their reach. Their potential was enormous, but opportunities were missed and chances wasted. Within the stable, the atmosphere reflected this, especially for the person who had been there from the start. We could have been world champion if we had wanted it. Since Imola, it was obvious that I won't stay with the team. It was all over. There was nothing we could do. And when I left, I said to them, you will never be world champion. It could have been with Alain Prost 3 years later, but they did not succeed once again. It is a shame indeed, because as a French, I always stayed in France, and I know we have everything to become world champion. We had it and we still have it now, but we have to recruit the good people at the same time. But in France, we don't know how to do it. In France, it's more friendship than competency. Even if one guy is not good looking or is difficult to work with, you know, only his competency should count. Only working with people who are good at their job, and not only pure friendship. And it's hard to say and hear, but it's the pure truth. René Arnoux, however, was to give Renault a last chance to shine a bit. We are at Zandvoort for the Dutch Grand Prix, and right from the first corner at Tarzan, the fight between Jones and the state-owned company's driver was ferocious. But the Australian made a mistake and distanced himself 3 laps behind the leaders, who were fighting it out furiously. There was a group of 6 cars all driving wheels in wheel, and to watch them takes your breath away. A pity for Pironi and Elio De Angelis. The Ligier and the Lotus got caught up together. At the front, Lafitte was now the leader in front of Arnoux, Jabouille and Villeneuve, who had never been so much part of the party since the start of the season. Pironi and the Angelis didn't miss a trick in this exciting race, which saw Nelson Piquet coming closer and closer to the two men at the front. Soon afterwards, he showed everyone how it should be done and took control of the race, where he remained. Piquet drove on to victory, his first since the West United States Grand Prix at Long Beach. In the World Championship, the Brazilian was now the only contender to take the title alongside Alan Jones. He was only 2 points behind, so it was not yet in the bag for Jones, who had shown himself to be sensitive to pressure. Piquet, with his Brabham, had the lightest car in the field, which, according to several specialists, was the most efficient of them all. I have always said that the best car at the moment, the best made, the best designed and the most efficient is the Brabham. Others agree with me, probably. A Brabham is beautiful to look at. I know that they have had problems, but they are only working with one driver. And I do really think that Nelson Piquet may not be world champion, but I have to say that the Brabham is a really good looking and seriously good car. Nelson Piquet not world champion? Don't anticipate anything, because before we set off for Italy, it seems quite legitimate to imagine that Jones was going to win the trophy. For the first time, the Italian Grand Prix did not take place in Monza, but at Imola, less than 100 kilometers from Maranello, the fief of Ferrari, which for the time being, had only marked a miserable 6 points in the championship. The two Renaults monopolized the front row, with Arnoux in pole position. Behind, using a maneuver that would not be allowed today, Reutemann was ready and waiting, made the most of the legendary push when the turbos went into action. However, the Argentinian missed a gear, and the two Renaults kept their places, although Piquet was a danger right from the start. To begin with, the duel opposed the two French drivers. Jabouille managed to get into first place. Soon Piquet overtook Arnoux. And then he set off for battle behind Jabouille. Behind them, a fiery battle between Villeneuve and Giacomelli. Ferrari against Alfa Romeo, all very symbolic. In front, Jabouille can do nothing, and he, in his turn, has to let Piquet pass. But soon the action was also taking place on the verges, with, for example, this touch by Vittorio Brambilla in the second Alfa Romeo. It was not the only one. One lap later, it was Gilles Villeneuve's turn to hit the side, this time much more seriously. A burst tire, and there was panic all over the place. Giacomelli went straight on, but was able to continue, a real Italian show. Piquet now has the race won. He held Jabouille and Arnoux respectfully behind. But Jabouille had to retire yet again. Oil leak in the end. In the end, Jean-Pierre only marked the 9 points from his victory in Zandvoort during the season, just as he had only marked the 9 points of his victory at Dijon in 1979. Piquet pockets his first victory of the season, like Jones, and went into the lead of the championship by one little point, even if everyone knew that the calculations would not be in his favor. In any case, it's up to Montreal for what is certain to be the final to the 1980 season. This is how, just before the Canadian Grand Prix, the second to last race of the season, Jones felt haunted by the ghost of failure.
How do you take the pressure?
Well, it varies. Some days I don't think about it and I'm quite relaxed, and other days I get a little bit twitchy, but not too bad, I don't think. Could be worse.
Alan Jones, who everyone thought they knew, a calm Australian, a solid driver. And here we discovered that he was anxious and more vulnerable than anyone guessed.
How would you describe your character?
Well, I don't really know. I suppose I think other people are probably better at describing other people's character than the people themselves.
Yeah, but what would you say? What would be its best feature in your?
I don't know. It'd be easier to tell you my worst features, I think.
Well, why not? Yes, of course.
Well, I'm fairly moody. My moods change a lot, you know. I'm sort of up and down a bit. But normally I like to think that I'm reasonably well-mannered and that I like to try and speak to anybody that, you know, that wants to speak to me.
Does that affect your driving?
Sometimes it does, yes. There are certain days when I feel very confident, very happy, and I inevitably drive much better. Other days when I'm down a little bit and feeling a bit depressed, I don't drive as well. I think that's the same with everybody, though.
At the start of the Grand Prix, Jones and Piquet set off side by side, but the two of them were so tight that it caused an enormous pileup behind them, in which, by some miracle, no one was injured. At the restart, Pironi took the advantage to begin with, but he had jumped the light and would be penalized by 1 minute. Jones took the advantage first, but Piquet soon took over command from him and got away. He had been obliged to restart with his second car, but it didn't seem to handicap him. But the Piquet's irresistible advance was about to be stopped. His engine let him down. Jones took over first place in a rather undetermined way. It's true, but it was to be his only victory lacking in panache during the season. If Jones could win the race, the title was his. Nothing could threaten him, not even Pironi. Even if it didn't look that way, Jones let him pass because he had been informed by his stand about the penalty imposed on the Frenchman. All he had to do was make it to the finish, and he could count on the reliability of his car, which was not the least of its qualities. In 75% of the races during the 1980 season, the Williams cars made it to the finish in the points, an exceptional success rate. On the podium, Jones couldn't open his bottle of champagne because the Arab sleeping partner in the stable forbade him to do so. Never mind that his winning of the World Cup was to be abundantly celebrated. The last Grand Prix of the season, fought out at Watkins Glen in America, had nothing at stake and little interest. The new world champion was already thinking about his well-deserved holiday.
I like my family life. I like in between races just to go and be a normal family man, and I like to do a little bit of business when I can.
How do you select your friends?
I don't think you can select friends. I think that you cultivate friends. I think that you meet people and then you know if you're going to strike a friendship with them or not, and you can tell whether it's going in the right direction. It's something that happens.
In any case, Alan Jones has deep affection for his employer, Frank Williams, whose passion and professionalism he appreciates.
Your fellow drivers?
No, I don't really. I haven't got any close friends as such, no.
The relationship between Jones and Reutemann have always been correct, almost warm.
Since you are racing for the title, do you think you became a different man or a different character at least?
Maybe unintentionally ruder towards the press, a little bit maybe, because I've had more pressure on me by them, whereas it was easy to be nice to everybody. Now it's not so easy to be nice to everybody because I have more people wanting to speak to me, and I can't speak to everybody all the time, so sometimes I have to say no to some people. But apart from that, really not much different, I don't think.
Jones also owed the title to the work of the whole team. And yet,
I believe a good racing driver has to be selfish.
Well, I think so. I think he has to be selfish and a little bit egotistical. Yeah, I think so.
selfish, Jones? No doubt. But indeed not miserly in his efforts. As soon as the start was given, though, he braked too hard, came off the track and came back in 19th place, in the lead. Surprise, surprise! We find the Alfa Romeo that is in constant progression, with Bruno Giacomelli, who was increasing his lead. Jones, meanwhile, was fighting as tough and as though his title still depended on it. The domination of the Alfa Romeo came to an end mid-race, with a fault in the electrical system. Jones continued to climb back up. For the time being, he was still a long way off, but he was catching up fast. He made one mouthful of Pironi and Reutemann. Compared to his teammate, the advantage was often given to the Australian. Even if Reutemann marked points 11 times against Jones' 10. The season finished as it started. Jones wins at the end of a race full of interesting developments in which he proved that he had the stuff of a champion. The figures are eloquent. 5 victories, and Williams took the Manufacturers' Cup. A totally justified triumph.